Okay, it is 7:02 p.m. and today is Wednesday, May 18th, which is shocking to me. That is already May 18th. This is a meeting of the Chagrin Falls Village Council Street Sidewalks Committee, but we were mostly meeting as a committee as a whole. So we started a couple years ago looking at the watershed on the north end of town. Oh, that's fun. Give us a minute.
Time delay in case there's any.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we started looking a couple years ago at some flooding issues we were having on the north end of town. The area streaming, just to deal with some of the flooding that we're seeing on properties, and before we replace the culvert on Locust, right? Yeah, Locust. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Locust.
And so we brought in watershed partners and brought in CT consultants to really take a full look at how that water flows. A lot of this area was developed prior to modern understanding of stormwater and what permeable surfaces do for us and how we manage that in a responsible way so that we're not creating downstream high-speed fallout like erosion issues, which we do see elsewhere in the village where we have more vintage, if you will, stormwater movement programs. So I'm going to let Rob give an intro and then we'll get started. But this is it's another piece of an ongoing conversation, and we're getting ready to really look at what those tangible solutions and opportunities really do look like, both for homeowners and for the village, and how we can really work together. So we'll let CT do their presentation, but also we'll give time for people to ask questions and understand this. Some of this does impact private property. Some of these solutions will impact private property. I haven't seen it, but that's Ms. Coiler that I've been told. And so we want to make sure we can do this in a way that works for homeowners and for everybody along the watershed. So, Rob?
Thank you, Madam President. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Jameson. I'm the Village Chief Administrative Officer. With me tonight is Mary Ann Hana and Josiah Denson, who have been studying the stormwater watershed and all of our options here. They're from CT Consultants. Also with us is Village Engineer Tim Lannon up here behind me. The meeting tonight is both here in person as well as on Zoom in a virtual format. So we are going to be screen sharing the presentation slides as we go through. So everybody that's virtual can see them as well as people here in person. This document will be uploaded to our village website tomorrow. So you'll be able to download it. Anybody in the public can download it and have a copy for themselves. I printed it off just a little bit ago and it's upwards of 46 pages. So there's a lot of good information here. Tonight, our last meeting was on November 8th, and that was to present the results of CT stormwater analysis of the watershed, looking at all the problem areas, taking in the feedback from the residents and the people, property owners in that area, and then doing sampling and modeling in that whole area, taking a very close technical look at how the watershed functions through these neighborhoods. And then over the last several months, CT has worked on a lot of possible solutions on how to handle and manage stormwater as it transverses this watershed. So they'll go over these ideas and the process to take another look as we move forward. So at any time after tonight, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Village Hall, and I'll put you in contact with people at CT, and we can get these things addressed. This is a very complex matter. It's not an easy solution on any accord. So it requires a lot of good understanding, good exchange information, and comments between everybody involved. So thank you. Without any delay, turn it over to Mary Ann Hana, project manager.
Great. Let's go ahead and do the next slide.
Oh, that's the Zoom. Okay, Karen.
All right, so as you can see from the first map, the red highlights our project area that we presented to you earlier this year. Josiah and I are just going to quickly kind of go through. We've spent a year on the project and trying and
yeah, that's good.
but it's about 75 acres. As Aaron pointed out, the alternatives, the solutions that we're showing you are gray and green. Traditional gray infrastructure does expedite storm flow downstream as quickly as possible. So just like we are planning the existing flows that we have today, if your upstream neighborhoods developed and brought in faster flows, then you would be inundated with new, stronger storm flows. So we're trying to holistically have a look at your watershed, solve solutions for you today, but for the people that are going to live here in 100 years. None of us in the room are going to be here, but hopefully we solve them thoughtfully and have long-term solutions. So that's kind of our starting point. Sorry. I'll just blink at you. Okay. Overall, our project goals were get the existing condition. We've explained to you how we did that through a variety of sources so that Josiah could basically build the computer model. So I'm sure he solves out in the field, and I should take a minute to say thank you for all the videos and the photos. They were really helpful in developing our model. So thank you to the residents who supplied those. Appreciate your time for that. And then we're going to go through we came up with 5 areas of focus that we're going to go through and present the gray and green solutions, and then kind of run through the feasibility and costs associated with that, and possible financing and funding opportunities, particularly for green infrastructure. Okay, with that, you want to?
Yeah, so just as like a really brief recap of what we went over last time, basically we put all of the data that we collected into the model to try to build something that would accurately reflect the conditions that we were seeing in real life. And this is just a refresher of one of the maps that we showed last time. This one's showing the depths and extents of flooding for what would be a 25-year storm event, so a pretty severe event. And you can see that it is reflecting that flooding that we see in the downstream area of Locust, particularly, and also along the road in the upstream Locust area. And this one doesn't show up in the Willow area, but we did get the model to show that as well. So you can go to the next one. So as Mary Ann was talking about, we identified 5 areas of focus that we'll go through here. So these are areas that we identified that could be potential high impact areas for projects and some improvements. So the first area is the sort of wetland area between Willow and Locust. It's a big open area that we'll talk about enhancing to potentially provide storage there for water to slow it down and let it infiltrate there. And then the second area is the existing pond in the Falls Walk neighborhood. The third area is the Willow Lane Falls Road area. And then the fourth is upstream Locust, and then downstream Locust is number 5. Okay. So then briefly, just kind of what I was saying. So the goals of each of these areas, the first and second areas, which are the 2 retention areas, is to slow down the flow so that it doesn't overwhelm the downstream areas. The third area, which is Willow, is to reduce flooding and increase the conveyance to move the water through there faster. The fourth area, which is upstream Locust, is to just generally reduce the flooding, that road flooding and yard flooding that you guys get there. And then the fifth area downstream, way at the bottom of the watershed, is to reduce that severe flooding that you get down there and increase the conveyance again to allow the water to move through more quickly so it doesn't build up. So the first area, as we talked about, is that area between Willow and Locust. This is a screenshot of the drone video of this area. It's kind of hard to see, but the highlighted area in blue is a potential area for water to be stored. So basically what we would do here is build up the downstream area a little bit to allow water to pool there and turn it into like an enhanced actual purposeful wetland storage area So it would hold quite a bit of water. It's actually a pretty large area, I mean, larger than the football field. And since it's so large, the depth of water really would never get that high there. Even in an apocalyptic storm, it would only get to a few feet high if we designed it correctly. And then basically, Marianne, if you want to talk through some of the potential plants that would be in there. And
Yeah, so it wouldn't just be, you know, we would intentionally put some plantings in place to, for that were native to the area, like your willows and, winter berries that can, you know, absorb a lot of water, but also really good for nutrient reduction. So they'll get the urban runoff and kind of soak up the phosphorus and nitrogen. And
you can move to the next one. Yeah, so this is a bird's eye view of the digital elevation model that we have for this. So you can kind of see the red areas are higher and the green areas are lower. There's a couple blue outlines there showing in that depression where the water would be if we put this wetland storage area there. So it would be in that very low wetland area down there, and it would be far away from anybody's property or homes. There are property lines on there, but they're so faded you can't really see them right now. But this would ideally all be within the easement of the Falls Walk neighborhood, the development there, yes.
Is that brown line some kind of dam or you?
Yeah,
yeah, actually, the idea would be pretty simple. This, you know, this whole area is lower. This area is a little higher, and literally just move that dirt over there.
Okay.
That's it.
yeah, it would be an
Really
earth,
low tech.
yeah, it would be an earthen wall sort of situation.
And depending on permitting, because it's jurisdictional, the water in the US, it could be beaver dam analogs, you know, something like that, but depending on.
Something to stop the water.
Right, exactly.
So in a storm event, when this area would surge high with flow, and then it would be metered out under a controlled
Correct.
flow rate, so it wouldn't negatively impact the people downstream. How long, roughly in a typical type storm where this would come into play, would it take for that area to water level to lower?
That's something I haven't actually modeled, but it would not take more than, hours. It wouldn't take days or anything.
From the time the rain stops, obviously.
Hours after the rain.
Okay, just so people have an idea of, it's not gonna be like a lake back there for a month. It's gonna hold it and then release it and get back to the way it was before the storm in a short amount of time.
Right. The idea would be to have maybe some sort of system of weirs, so that it would always allow a certain amount of flow through at a certain rate. But then once the water got high enough, it would be able to kind of spill over a little bit more at a time. And it would be released at a controlled rate, so it wouldn't overwhelm the downstream areas.
The control rate would be determined how.
For
Would
this-
you be measuring downstream or, let's say, closer to number 5? To make sure the water is flowing before you release them, or?
It would basically be for lack of a better term, the size of the opening that would control how much water was getting through. So we would have a couple different sizes of openings for how much water was coming through, to let it flow at a specific rate, only allow a certain amount of water through, but also to keep the water level low
But not necessarily dependent upon how the conditions were
downstream. No,
Okay.
no.
So when you build an earthen, is an earthen dam the right phrasing? How, obviously this is in people's backyards, so how, once it's built, how long does it last? Or is it on HOA land?
It's on your easement. The village has a stormwater easement.
Yeah.
So
Yes, yeah.
how long do these dams or earthen barriers last? Like how much maintenance do they require in their lives?
I don't believe it will require much maintenance. It would be a pretty permanent solution.
The idea is that it would kind of function as a permanent wetland area that you might see out in nature, something like that. So the idea is nature would kind of take over.
Yep.
So you would start it and then things would pop up and there would be some sort of engineers aren't great at adaptive management. They think they can just build it and there's no maintenance. But the idea is that you have some money in the budget. So after, year 1, year 3, you would be able to modify anything that you would need to. But,
You also need access around your control structures for any maintenance that gets silted in. As long as we have access to get a piece of equipment back there to keep those functioning as intended, which is the case with all retention and detention basins.
Is the area wooded now?
No.
no, it's actually, when you go out there in the wintertime, we were out there in January and it is wide open. It feels like, if you were to yell, I'm not sure you go forever. It's huge. That's why we were so excited, because we had no idea when, it's summertime, everything looks like it's a little bit covered more than it is, but it's really, really wide open.
Down there scrubbing invasive, or, privet, some multifloral rows. It's really nothing of any either wildlife value or habitat value or beauty value. But those pictures in that previous screen was the idea would be to replant it with things that would be both attractive and native, so you'd be improving the look and things that don't mind growing out of wet soil conditions.
Right, and then you'd be attracting butterflies, and so, you have that kind of, and I would imagine some birds that maybe you normally wouldn't get, so.
It's surprisingly open. The only thing that's really down there is grass and like a couple very large dead trees that would be taken out. So this is just a lot of numbers, but it's more or less just going through the peak flow reduction that this would provide. So that 5th column over that's highlighted with the red numbers shows the percentage of flow reduction for each size storm. So for the smaller storms, like a 1 year and a 2 year, those are the storms that happen all the time. You get those basically every year. It would be reducing the peak flows that come through that area by almost 75 to 80%. And it would also do that in the 10 year. It gets a little bit of diminishing returns for the larger storms because it's just so much water that this could only be designed to, capture so much water, basically, realistically.
Like an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Yeah.
Like an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Yeah. But basically, that's what this is showing. It would be a significant reduction to the peak amounts of flows going through there. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so our second area of focus is the existing retention pond at Falls Walk. So this is looking if you look at the very back part of the pond, that's where the water comes in from the newer development, and then it exits to the right of the photograph once it fills up to a certain level. But it's pretty stationary. It basically just holds a couple feet of water normally. That's
Are you proposing this would hold more water than it does now?
Yes, I'm about to show you. Yeah, it's very exciting. I know, but you're foreshadowing very well. So, and then this is looking at the opposite side. So now I've turned the photo around, and now we're at the intake. So now we're at the houses, and the water comes in, and then you can kind of see the control structure very faintly in the far left-hand side of the photograph. And so there's a control structure there too. And the actual lowest part of the ground is that second arrow where it can naturally, it's a natural spillway, that if the water got really high, it would naturally go down that course, that waterway, head down towards Locust. So the idea is that we could retrofit this pond. This is an example pond with some equipment that's not very expensive to make it smart. So what that means is you can see there's just a solar panel. That's what you need for some electrical. That's all you need for electrical. It would be outfitted with a microcomputer. And then the stormwater structure will need a level sensor on it and basically a valve, an actuated butterfly valve that will open when it needs to open. So I think the next slide might have some more detail, but there's the butterfly valve itself. So it would go inside of the control structure And when you wanted to, you could automate it from the village hall on a, computerized, and tell it when you wanted it to open, and it could naturally take the water and discharge it out before a storm came in. So the idea is that you see the rainfall coming and you say, oh, let's lower the pond a little bit, depending on how much rainfall is coming or the size of the storm, or you can just say, oh, I'll release so much CFS. So you can do that ahead of time, and then the pond would be lower. We modeled up to 1 foot depth to lower, which is, pretty good size.
Could be more.
Yes, it can be more. And then the idea is that when the rain came in, the rain would fill up the pond back to the normal elevation that the residents are used to seeing. So the time that would be lowered wouldn't be that long, and then it would refill. But the nice part about this, not only does it slow down the water, it also is great for water quality, because one of the number one pollutants for water, for our surface waters, is sediment. And it takes days for sediment to get out of the water column. And, when you're kind of rushing stuff through, the sediment's being pushed downstream. That's actually why the Clean Water Act was invented, basically created, because the federal government was tired of dredging at the downstream sections of all the rivers. So the idea is that this would allow that sediment to go ahead and trickle down to the bottom of the pond instead of pushing through downstream.
Question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So would this be a manual process, or?
You can make it anything you want. You can make it automated, so nobody has to go out there at all. It's
Okay.
just done by the computer, tells it when to do. It has AI, so it learns as it goes. So
Okay.
it gets better and better and better as you develop it.
And you could manually control it like from a phone or a tablet if you wanted to, from anywhere. It's all like connected to the cloud, and you said it's AI and it learns, but it also has like predictive ability, so it can look at like a forecast.
That's what I wondered.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's similar to the now forecasting that they do at the Lake Erie beaches, where they say they predict whether the beach will be E. coli at the beaches. Well, you can go to the beach or not. So they do it at, I think, hundreds of beaches.
yeah. So it could look at a forecast and say, okay, it's going to need to be lowered this much.
Okay.
And they look at the power of the model. So if you get, false positives or negatives, kind of like you're, going in for a medical test,
Yeah.
and learn from that.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
I do have a question. So when it or someone senses that, oh, we should lower that, is it let out slowly?
Yeah.
As opposed
Yes,
to
exactly. That's the whole point. So you wouldn't see
over course of-
exactly. It could be longer. Yes, you can do it as, you can model it however you want.
It's a small, that butterfly valve that we're showing isn't like a huge thing. It was like this big.
Yeah.
So like it would only be able to go through as fast as you could get it through that small pipe.
Exactly.
So it would be controlled.
Sorry, one more thing. Do we have easement on that pond already? Like, do we know? Or do we have to work with the HOA to get permission?
That's a good question.
I think we do,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't swear to it, but I think we do.
Yeah, we mapped that in the reason.
I think that, that's right. And so the worst case scenario is it functions as it is today. You don't get a worse behavior. And then the kind of idea behind this is these are two hydrographs. The one on the left, this is showing the rainfall for about 100 retention ponds in the Philadelphia area. And the idea of these retention ponds were that they were supposed to lower, those peak flows to help out, conditions and not create so much storm water, flashy flows, the urban flashy flows. And you can see that connected regionally, they don't lower it by even 0.5%. But if you offset these discharges and get some of the water out of the retention ponds, you can actually effectively truncate that hydrograph by about 20%. So not only do you have the idea of, hey, I started in this pond, you have the ability to connect it regionally to additional ponds in the future that you wanted to for your community, upstream, downstream communities, you can connect it regionally. So there's planning for the future.
I'm just wondering if Smart Pond is like a proprietary system or branding.
No, it's just a general name, but there is a gentleman named by the name of Bob Backfirst who works with Century Engineering, Kleinfelder Company. It's in Maryland, and I think he calls it Smart Swim SWM.
Yeah.
So that would be his acronym for it, but it's free to, the idea is that we think, civil engineers think this is a good idea and we're sharing information, much like the medical field does when they get together and say, hey, we use this and it's helping us, try and use it in your area, that kind of thing. And this is the equipment it would need. So the left is the sensor. This is a hi-fi sensor, which we found, you have them in Sugar Falls. They're very, very reliable. There's not much editing on the data. And then the butterfly valve with the actuator, the motor on top, the microcomputer, and a solar panel. So, and the good news is this technology, the prices are not expensive and they're dropping as considerably. And this is just an example of inside the stormwater control measure, what your retrofitting might look like. So as Josiah said, that kind of butterfly valve, we would just add a lower kind of, entrance for the water to kind of discharge out. So the big pipe on the backside on the left is the one that actually exits. So you can see it's quite a bit smaller than the one exiting. So we would not be allowing a rush of water to come in.
And it looks like it wouldn't take much power back to the solar
Exactly.
panel.
Right.
All you have to do is turn that on the computer.
Exactly.
Is it set per meter in case everything went to Google, kind of crash?
Yeah, we can definitely do that, yes.
And then these are Josiah's model for the pond. So you can kind of see it's really helpful for those smaller 1 to 2 year storms. It basically takes that peak flow down to almost nothing. In a larger storm, it's not going to be the apocalyptic event. You're not going to see it be effective, but it's really for planning for your smaller storms.
Yeah, the idea is to take away the smaller storms and potentially do this in conjunction with other improvements in the area so that it would be more effective together with them. So our third area of focus was Willow Lane. So as you know, there's a lot of flooding up there, particularly closer to the intersection. And the existing capacity issues we found are really in these 3 pipes in red, particularly pipes A and B that come into the pipe that goes down towards Locust. They are undersized and they just can't handle the flow that's coming into them from upstream, probably just as a result of development and the pipe size not keeping up with the amount of runoff that's coming from that area. So the gray infrastructure improvement here would basically just be to increase the sizes of those pipes to allow the flow to get through. So right now, the one coming from Willow is a 15, the one coming from North Street is an 18-inch, and then it's an 18-inch exiting. You would think that would cause the one downstream to not be able to handle it, but it's very sloped. So the water is able to go through there faster, and it actually has the capacity. But we would upsize all of those pipes to 24-inch, and we've calculated that would be sufficient to allow the water to flow through.
This feeds into the proposed wetland you're talking about.
Correct.
Trying to locate it.
Yep. Yes, this would be basically a direct line to that first area that we were looking at, that wetland storage area. So that would be the gray infrastructure improvement. And this is just a graph showing that they're undersized, but I think we can move through that. So the green infrastructure improvement here would be in the area upstream of Willow Lane, actually on Falls Road and on Cleveland Street further to the east. Basically, there are ditches, like roadside ditches, coming down from those areas right now that are providing a lot more flow than we thought they were, just from those areas up there. So we would basically do some green infrastructure improvements in those ditches and expand the ditches to provide sort of a floodplain, and put some vegetation in there to slow down the flow and allow it to infiltrate into the ground a little bit more. And in addition to that, we would add some basins, which you can kind of see in that brownish color at the intersection there. There would be a large one in that sort of triangular area between the two streets, and a smaller one on the west side of Falls Road there. And they would allow for the flow to be able to be stored there. And once again, slow it down coming into that area so that it wouldn't be such a huge rush of water coming in and flooding the road and the yards.
Very similar to what we did in Greenbrier, Greenhaven.
Yep.
2 years ago, and that had worked.
Yes.
So when you're talking about expanding the ditch size, I know that's not a huge amount of expansion, but can you give an example of, say, if a ditch is 6 foot wide at the top, how much larger we would be looking? And it wouldn't be just a ditch, it would be a bioswale, so there'd be plant material and things too, but just to give people an idea of that impact and how much wider we're talking.
Yeah, it wouldn't be much larger. I think mostly it would be, so if the ditch is like a V shape right now, I think that the side towards the road would stay mostly the same because it's next to the road. And then we would kind of have a more gradual,
Flat bottom.
flat bottom, and then a more gradual slope towards the yards.
Depending on utilities, 5 feet wall at 5, as long as you're not running into,
Yeah, we're just trying to create more of a floodplain instead of a ditch to allow the water to spread out a little more.
And aesthetically, that has some benefits to it as well. Not instead of just having a ditch, you'd have to mow and have rocks or wherever else you would have plantings on this and making it an aesthetic issue too.
Yeah.
Does this water flow into Willow currently, the Willow area? So this water eventually would go to.
your house.
Your house.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
That's all, we're in the very upstream part. Yep.
Yeah,
It comes down.
if it's not able to be contained in those ditches, it'll go onto the road on Falls Road there, or it'll come down Willow, it'll turn and come down Willow, and it goes down North Street as well. But all of that still drains to what eventually is your house, yeah. So that'll be coming away.
So the good thing about green infrastructure is that we're not at the very beginning. So like the EPA has done a lot of studies, a lot of monitoring, and what they're finding out are the smaller is very impactful and very robust. Meaning, if you want to put in a rain garden, smaller ones tend to do better because larger ones, when it rains, and when it's dry, it's dry. These are plants. So you can imagine in the growing season, they may need more water. So if you have a huge area, that's a lot of maintenance. Typically where the inflow pipe is coming in, the tree sizes are larger because they're getting fed more. So a lot of studies have already been done, and they've got a lot of great research out there. But pretty much anywhere you wanted to put a rain garden in front of a house or kind of in a swale in the right of way, you can do it. You can disconnect the downspout from the roof from any impervious area and connect it to a set of plantings. They work in the sun, they work in the shade. They're not very deep. A lot of the area, whether it's clay, whether it's sandy, it doesn't matter. They will. The idea is that in a smaller storm, the water would infiltrate into the ground. Certainly there's an overflow pipe if you have a larger storm, so the water would, exit, go into the garden and out, and it would not flood the area. So the idea is that, you could pepper these wherever you wanted them. You can have low maintenance shrubs, you can have high maintenance shrubs, all depending on somebody's interest at the home. And then just so you can kind of have an idea, the next slide is just an example. This is just the house that is on Willow on the north side, just second over from the main intersection. And the idea is highlighted in light orange is the entire impervious area. So it's taking the driveway and the roof and the depth. And the idea is that you can't really put all of that into a garden. That would take up half your front yard. So the idea is that kind of that front area of the roof is really what you would drain into the yard. But it is effective and it helps. And if you have them in your community, you will see a collective response. And then this is just an example of one that it could look like. They will not have water in them for longer than 48 hours. So it would turn to a regular looking garden, and you can make it look more, rocky. You could have more, grassy, you could have trees. There's quite a variety of native plants that you can use for that. And they're pretty effective. They do, like you said, shows you 150 gallon for a typical 1-inch rainfall event. It will take. So if you imagine each home does that, that's a lot of rainfall. We're not talking about a little rain barrel. We're talking a lot of them. So, yeah.
So the proposed rain garden would be just at that house? Or
Anywhere. I'm saying anywhere in the whole watershed. You can put them anywhere you want. That's what I'm trying to show you. So if you wanted to target, hey, this area is getting more water, then it'd be great to have them either upstream of that area or at that area. But you can have them. There's no place that you can't put them.
So I imagine some of these may initially be installed through various means, both the village potentially and also through homeowners. Are we seeing, and maybe this is more of a watershed, but are we seeing more landscapers who are certified and understand how to properly install these so that we get the drainage? Like, are we seeing people learn this?
Yeah. So Sugar Watershed Partners does have a master rain garden where we are trying to educate landowners about a rain garden installation, but we also have a landscaper certification program. So we've gotten some folks educated, and we're continuing to try to educate more in Northeast Ohio. That's ongoing. That started a couple of years ago. So we're kind of at the beginning of that. We're hoping to educate more.
I just want to make sure that as we go, it's because I definitely feel like there's a big education piece that we're going to need to provide to the community, but also that we're connecting them with resources that we can install and we can also help them maintain.
And right, there is that maintenance factor. So as a garden, it would need maintenance, particularly until the plantings mature. But yeah.
I just had a question. So you're saying that like the homeowners sort of are responsible for the rain gardens, but you guys are in control of the ditching. How does that work? Like, how does that passing? Like, I'm just curious how in that mindset is like, well, you can put that here, but we're in control of the ditch. So we ever need to move it or shift it. Like, what if a homeowner spends thousands of dollars to put in a rain garden, and then you guys come along and say, well, we want to shift it along, or we want to remove it or relocate it? Like, how does that work with the homeowner?
I'll be honest, I don't necessarily see that happening, since it would be a stormwater mitigation thing that would be them trying to remove. But my guess is you would come and yell at the council if the administration wasn't listening to you, and then we yell at the administration and we would find a solution.
I can see any time that we've done work in the right of way for village improvement. We've remediated that impact to residents. So like we have to take out trees and bushes to install a pipe, or if we have, say that something isn't working on a bigger scheme, we have to make that area bigger. We're responsible for those project costs. And as a village, we've always made sure that that impact is in concert with the homeowner. Now, we can always disagree at some point. That is possible. And there's always the ability to appeal any decision of administration to council, but we've worked very hard to avoid that from ever happening. Because we're doing it to benefit you. We're not doing it because we have nothing to do, or we want to spend money somewhere. We want to solve a problem. So the only reason we would be up there is, hey, if something's not working, maybe it's causing a backup further upstream or something, and then we try to work with the homeowners to understand, or to all work together so we understand what's going involved and minimize that impact. So like landscaping typically doesn't include like a permit, right? If a homeowner went and privately went out, like, hired a contractor to come in and do these rain gardens in that ditch, is that a permanent thing now, or is that? Well, they can do that if it'll affect the functionality if they don't do it correctly. I mean, it'd be like replacing a pipe. If there's a pipe that the village installed, you can't remove it as a homeowner. But if there's something that, a homeowner has, I mean, like a pipe would be something that would be permitted, but landscaping is not. Now, if somebody installs landscaping and it causes water back up and it causes or water to divert into the street, then the village would get involved and contact you and say, hey, you just installed this landscape, now the water's going on the road, that's not acceptable. And can issue a violation letter and then give you a chance to correct that problem. Obviously, we're not going to issue a letter right off the bat. We're going to have a conversation about that and say, hey, what just happened here caused an issue. We need to get that fixed. And, hopefully we can come to agreement. And the village can enforce the rights to make sure water can get off the road and drain properly. So we like to encourage people, if they're doing landscaping in the right of way or close to it, to contact us if there is something that is of concern that might impact the water drainage factor.
So maybe I missed it, maybe it's coming, but did you map out like how many of these we need? Like with what houses would have to have them, where they would go, how big they are, that kind of thing yet, or?
We haven't gotten into quite that much detail yet with it, but
I think the ones they're thinking about is rain gardens in the road right away. What they're showing is that people wanted to put these in their yards where they got low spots, and that it would be helpful, but not required. I think that's really what we did down in Greenbrier and that subdivision out there, and sort of doing up on West Summit Street. So confining the work that we're doing to the right of way and showing people how, if they have further wet spots in their yard, this is a solution if they wanted to do it, but not requiring it.
from the modeling, I was going to say that we found that the most impactful spot in this area was to put them upstream of Willow in those ditched areas that we were showing earlier. Because that's where a lot of the water is coming from that's flooding Willow.
Specifically Falls and North Lake.
Yep.
I just was wondering
Or North Street, excuse me.
how many people would actually have to agree to it to mitigate the issue downstream.
Well, it helps, right? In this day and age of climate change, the storms are just becoming more intense, more frequent. So, unlike the West Coast where they don't have enough water, we have, abundance of water. And so planning for that, just educating the public, saying this is something that every little bit counts, kind of like recycling does.
It's kind of an evolutionary change that we're looking at, and watershed partners, not CT, but watershed partners have been working in this area for about 10 years now, Kim?
Master and Gardener program?
Yeah.
Maybe like 5 years or so.
5 years or so. So it's, it's going to take time, but it's particularly good if you've got pre-existing wet areas. You just make them a little wetter and you plant them. And, as people are, beginning to accept more and more.
So I can add a little bit to that. I know over the last several years, Watershed Partners has come out and done some site visits on individual properties in the village where people were having problems controlling the stormwater on their own private property, whether it be water coming down the hillside or water navigating on the property. And they've provided guidance to those residents on things they can do within their own private property. That assistance is done through our agreement with them. It's none of it involves public right-of-way work, but it's all been advisement to residents that things they can do on their own property to help the situation, help their own conditions.
So we're saying that the rain gardens are only valuable upstream to Willow Lane, right, to those properties?
Well, I think they're valuable anywhere in a watershed. I want to say the county, Cuyahoga County probably has, through the Gardner class, I think they have 150 rain gardens complete. And they've been documenting the 5,000 is pretty much is an underestimation. They think it's probably more like 10,000 gallons. So it's.
So I understand like in general water lines.
Right.
I'm saying for like the specific issues that we're dealing with the flooding, upstream is gonna have the most value to preventing the water coming downstream. That's kind of what we're saying, right?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, they're
Yes.
all valuable, but
Yes.
that's the most
Yes.
impactful.
Correct.
Okay, so
Right.
if the city is the city gonna impose on the homeowners for the right of way that you guys are, like, for the owners that of those properties upstream, like they don't have flooding issues, right? They sit 15, 20, 30 feet above Willow Lane. So why, if you guys came in and said, hey, we want to do water gardens, like, why would they? Why, if it's gonna require maintenance and also take a lawn, why would they ever consider putting in sprinklers?
Well, that is a very good question. Part of it is, understanding how that watershed works in that area. The maintenance in the right of way, I know, like the ones we installed in Greenbrier, we've done several replantings that the village has undertaken that maintenance. And handle that for people. Obviously, small weeding, things like that, you know, we welcome residents to do that kind of work. But it is something the village installed and we've taken responsibility for that. You know, that's where part of the aesthetics come into play and understanding of what's going on. Also, the village does have the right to say we need to install these control structures because we do have flooding. And we do need to implement some solutions here, looking at the whole watershed as a whole. So yeah, a resident very much can say, I don't want you touching, I want my lawn right to here. And those kind of problems we'll have to have further discussions on. There is no easy answer to that. But we try to be sensitive to all those people upstream, but also we're trying to look at the greater good and the best way to handle this for everybody concerned.
We're not talking about it all going on any private property, or requiring anything on private property right now. You know,
Well, I understand, she just made a comment that, you know, that the homeowners might take on responsibility to install the water gardens. And I'm saying that for the homeowners that have water issues, that might be great for those homeowners to take on that responsibility to help dissipate some of the water. The homeowners that don't have that, you know, will have the most impact, they have no incentive to go spend money to put in water, you know.
Well, and I think the difference here is the ones that she was talking about mainly on private property, individual property owners that have water problems on their property. So the ones we're talking about, like placing along Falls Road and at the Triangle, those are village installed, you know, those are installed on the village right-of-way properties where we have control over what happens in the greater mission. So we wouldn't be asking for people to spend private money in the right-of-way to do those. They're two separate things, even though it's the same product of the rain garden.
Right, but we're also talking about we're talking about essentially communicating with the whole community about why these on-property water mitigation pieces help everybody. And so I do think it's plausible that you'll have people who choose to put in rain gardens because it's ethically the right thing to do to help allow water to infiltrate within your property and not just go with the mid-19th century model of push it to the road and let it go where it goes. And that's what we're dealing with now is that mid-19th century, is that the right fair way to say it, model. And so my new question was really related because I think as people sort of start to learn about this and understand more why this matters so much, hopefully we'll see a mindset change and we'll see people reaching out to landscapers or doing it themselves. And you'll see even more, theoretically, you should see more rain gardens as education and as we sort of learn that we can do things better. That's where I was going with that. Because we have people who are really obviously, their property is deeply impacted by how much water we're pushing. And we have to find a way to let everybody understand that they can make a difference here.
I was just gonna say, is there any grant money available either through the watershed or through anything else that you could say as you're educating homeowners that you could say, hey, if you do this, we're gonna be able to.
we're gonna get to the grant aspects a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
That funding will be part of it.
Sorry, we can go to the next one.
Okay, yeah, just to briefly kind of go through the upstream locust area. This area has flooding, as we know, in some of the yards and the road. It likes to go onto the road here. But the idea here will basically be, I guess the green infrastructure improvement idea here would be to increase again, like we would upstream, kind of increase the floodplain of the ditch a little bit, repurpose the rock. And if you go to the next slide, and then repurpose the ditch as a sort of vegetated stream. Similar to what we were looking at upstream. But yeah, basically we would try to engage a little bit of the floodplain, slow down the flow, both with infiltration and with vegetation, and repurpose some of the rock to dissipate the energy of the stream coming down the hill. So basically slowing it down is the goal here.
Sounds more attractive.
Yeah.
How
Yes.
close to the road would those rock embankments be? Because do we worry about slumping of those ditch sides? If they're-
We really would be impacting the other side.
Yes, yeah. We can't get much closer to the road, so I think it would be the other side if we expanded it a little bit. Again, it would be a less steep sort of grade up and more of a gradual,
Like a 3-to-1 slope.
yeah.
The nice thing here is it looks like there's a lot more vegetation, that's throughout the entire passageway and not just a solid rock channel like it is today.
Yeah, it's a little harsh.
Yeah, and again, it helps with nutrients, right? So we went out sampling a couple of times and a normal stream probably has for phosphorus concentrations about 0.05, really low milligrams per liter. I want to say on average, probably 0.3. So you're about that 0.3 milligrams per liter is what we sampled when we were out there. So you definitely have some urban non-point source nutrient pollution runoff in the area. So plants definitely help with that. So, because all that gets pushed down to the lake area. Okay, our last area of focus. So we have a couple of proposed solutions. The first one would be the gray infrastructure to convey a larger capacity. So right now, the existing 30, 36 inch, depending on records you look at, 34 inch, a little old there. The pipe underneath Locust Lane is undersized and has substantial backwater condition to Christine's house. So the idea is that instead of sending it across the street and down, we could just possibly, one of the options is to just make a diagonal straight to the manhole that connects across North Main Street. So the downstream section across North Main Street is a 4x4 culvert. So then we would just kind of extend that up to where you see the beginning part of the red line. So we would just have a increased capacity of about 200%. So when those bigger storms happen, the water just goes through. And then the green option would be much like our upstream enhanced wetland area. We would create a similar downstream wetland area. So in the photo at the bottom right is we're looking at the stream upstream of Locust Lane. And it's hard to see, but actually it's quite a bit lower than the road. So as you approach the stream, as you approach Locust Lane, it's probably 7 to 10 feet lower than the road. And right now, in the next photo, you'll see that the stream, that kind of digital elevation map that we're showing you, can kind of see the little the depressed area. So it's not engaging the floodplain. It's running in this very, very narrow path and then heading straight to the pipe and then just backing up. So instead of doing that, it would be more of a stream restoration where we, flatten out the banks a little bit, provide vegetation, like a forested riparian area, more native plantings. And then instead of it shooting down there, you kind of have a more gentler stream meandering kind of through the floodplain area, but not endangering anybody's home. So in the next one, that's your model.
This is the existing conditions, kind of what the water does now and where it goes. You can see it piles up near the road at the north side, and it gets really deep there, as Christine knows well. And our model predicted in really bad storms, it would get a good 6-7 feet deep towards the road.
And this is just a 25-year event.
Yeah.
And how many 25-year events did we have last year? No, I mean, just because I don't think everyone realizes that it doesn't happen every 25 years. Like we had many, right?
Yeah, and as Marianne was saying earlier, it's only getting more severe with climate change, and they're happening more and more often. So.
No, I've provided videos and photos that in the last 4 years, 5 years, it's happened 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4, but a lot.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
Probably a 25-year storm has really become more like a 10-year storm is what I feel, or even 5-year in some cases.
As soon as it starts to rain, I'm nervous
Yeah.
every time, which is awful.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there.
No, but it does matter. I mean, it's. I'm just right there.
Yeah, that's why we're here. So the proposed idea, as Marianne was talking about, is to both slow it down, provide a floodplain, and then this area, it wouldn't be this exact area that we have outlined here, but basically the idea would be to have this area act similarly to the upstream enhanced wetland area, where it would kind of pile up in a designated area and slow down, and not be as deep, and not be flying down the stream. And then it would allow for some storage and some infiltration here as well.
So that blue is going down, is that like towards Lindale?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you proposing the stream and restoration of floodplain, restoration and then together with the culvert replacement, like both happening at the same time? Or
Yeah. Yes.
Or not necessarily?
Well, we're gonna show you another iteration.
Yeah.
So there's more, but yes, like we were looking at them independently, each one separately, and then possibly combining the impact of, which is, we'll talk about next.
Culvert rusted out, so it needs to be replaced anyways, it's just a matter of what size, right? Depending on how much improvement we can make upstream.
And what angle?
Correct.
Yes.
When I saw this schematic, the water coming from, that's now going in a pipe underneath Locust wouldn't even be going there. It would be going to the 4x4.
Correct.
And the reason that I note that is the pipe going from my yard to that is round. And I was just about to figure out whatever, I think it's 42 inches.
Yeah.
Is, so the 4x4 pipe seems significantly more flow
Yes.
than what currently exists. And the reason I'm concerned is my 42-inch pipe backs up. And it goes, unfortunately, it doesn't hit my house, but if enough water comes from upstream, it could. But it sounds like it would be 4x4 from her yard to.
Yeah, and the idea is that it would be large enough that it would back up. So that it
Because
should be able to
why
pass
don't you
through.
take it right underground under Main Street and, there you got on the other side of Main Street, you got like a 20-foot drop.
Pump station there for sanitary.
Yeah, but I'm saying north of pump.
Oh.
100 feet.
The culvert under North Main is roughly a 4x4 box, so
It's big enough.
that's the only thing that was built in that neighborhood that's properly sized, and that was done by the county in like 1925. It was a gift of our predecessors.
All this new water coming down.
Right, so it's what the model shows, that that's the appropriate size. And the 4x4 could be oversized if any improvement is made upstream, so that's, your design is matching what the county figured out in 1925, and then everyone ignored in the 50s.
Yes.
Undersized, and also built out of corrugated metal, which was an added gift. For us. So,
The 42-incher I have gives water for more than just what I get water from my property, and then that empty lot next to me, that's pretty steep. And the water on something ridge, what's the street?
Timber Ridge, yeah.
Comes to my yard also. So it's not just.
Yeah, we have that accounted in the model as well. We've got all hopefully every drop of water that comes through your yard should be accounted for.
But my question is, why do you take it through my yard? When if you're gonna dig under the road, where it only drops down 20 feet into on the other side of North Main Street.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 20 or 30 foot.
my answer is the culvert under North Main is in good condition and it's properly sized, so that's a pseudo law for this subdivision, just take it to the entrance, which is on your front yard. That's properly sized, so if we get it to that point, we have the full capacity that we would have designed if we did.
Yeah, and I think digging.
Is there a significant difference in cost?
Yeah, it's right, it's just, right.
Okay, because you're taking risks, or I am getting risks that I currently don't have. If you bring this water the way you've got it going.
Well, I think you're in better, you're in.
Yeah, you're in better shape. You're cutting the water that's coming down or stretching it over a longer period of time.
Only if the 4x4 is big enough. I agree with that. But it hasn't ever been tested.
Well, that's what the model is for. We have been testing it, yeah.
I know, but I'm saying I have more risk. Whatever that is.
I think all the water is getting to the opening further upstream on your property, regardless of pipe sizes now, because in a larger storm, water just overtops Locust Lane and ends up in your front yard further east. So this pipe would take it, further west, closer to the outlet. So it'd be more water in the pipe as opposed to, I think it gets there anyways now in a larger storm.
Well, it's the only egress for the water, so it's getting there. Now, what we're doing is taking it to the pipe instead of having it flow through the yard.
Right, that would be my thought.
Yes.
If the pipe is, if the 4x4 is big. Right, yeah. Today, I would say yes, I would agree with that. Because even though my pipe backs up, it's a regular way, you're bringing a lot more water down from uphill.
Oh, no, I think the water's getting there from uphill. Anyway, we're hoping.
No, it's stopping in her yard.
I'd say that's in a 5-year storm.
Because she has a small pipe coming into my yard.
That's temporary. A bigger storm just goes right over the
It's
top.
going over the road,
It gets-
yeah.
It gets.
That happened one time, in the 7-year time.
Yeah,
It was when we had that 3.
That's the numbers I'm talking about. 5 to 10-year storm, it's gonna go right over Locust. Doesn't matter what size pipe is under Locust, or even if there is a pipe. The water all ends up in your front yard now. And I don't think North Main is at risk in Lyle and
No.
historic record that water doesn't overtop North Main Street. It pools in the yards and so in Christie, Rick Sewell's yard now. So I think
It doesn't, in mine, it doesn't have conflict, but there are times where it does back up.
It's because the road is back in the water.
Exactly, it's staying in her yard.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is, as long as you're gonna dig something under the road, why not dig it under the road, the other road? And let it go drop, 20-foot canyon there.
Well, I think part of it's cost, and the other part of it is their model is showing it's not necessary to incur that cost. Because currently we have to replace that corrugated pipe that's under Locust Lane just because it's collapsing or will collapse. And what we're doing is going under Locust Lane once, but we're going under Locust Lane in the most direct way to a culvert that already goes under North Main Street. And the model is showing that culvert is adequate to take all of the flow that would be coming down. Keep in mind that we're also proposing a number of structures, that butterfly valve up and fall off, the 2 wetland areas, the widening that is going to significantly slow the speed and reduce the height of the volume that hits your road. So it should not be occurring.
Bill, I think that 4x4 is big enough. I like the retention stuff and butterfly valves. I'm saying it would seem to me, and I don't know, that you're gonna dig under a road. I'm saying, why dig under a road for my yard, but you can dig a road one time to a 20-foot canyon, which goes to the Schwinn River. I mean.
Well, I thought you were all about saving government money. We're trying to do this.
Not for a homeowner thing. I mean, essentially what we're doing is taking water from other homeowners and driving it down to where we live.
But that what we're showing.
Is that?
No, that's not correct.
Well, I do think gravity's already doing that for us, so it's like, how do we put it into containment that will slow it down, so it's not going to be, water against Christine's, basement. And also make sure that your yard isn't being flooded with back.
You're adding risk is what I'm saying.
No, we
I-
don't think you are. We
I
think
think
we're
we're adjusting
reducing
it.
risk.
I would agree with that. Can I ask a question about what it looks like in Christine's yard? So let's say we do this diagonal 4x4 across the road. Then what does that look like in her yard? Like,
Probably a head wall, would be a head wall to it.
let's pretend I don't know what a head wall is.
So a head wall is a concrete vertical, so you'd have the box culvert,
Right,
and then you'd have either a concrete wall or two small wing walls leading up to it to channel the water from the stream, angle it into that box culvert, and then you'd have the guardrail at the top if needed, depending on the exact.
does it have one of those like metal grates, like they have
No.
with that?
No, it'd be totally open.
So it's like a big 4-foot, like.
Yeah, open channel, yes.
Would it be more or less the same place of every 2 inches?
The start of it would be, but it would be at a different angle. It would not aim it at Rick's house. It would.
Right now, you got a 90-degree turn in Rick's, and that's part of the reason it's backing up his, because when you turn water, it slows it down. It goes up. If you look at that layout, it's about a 45-degree angle. It forms like a triangle. So it'd be a straight shot. The water would go through that faster, in addition to the retention upstream. So I think it's, you've got to view these proposals as an integrated proposal. It's kind of what we would propose doing is all of these things. We're not proposing doing one and not the others. We're proposing to do all of these. So there's an integrated solution to the problem that starts all the way up on North Cleveland Falls with the ditch improvements. It goes all the way down to straightening this pipe out, so it's a more straight shot into that structure and not making it turn and slow up and giving it an opportunity to back up into your yard.
I'd also say, design, nation maps, I don't know if you have it in the presentation, but your house is at roughly, the driveway at the garage is elevation 953. And the elevation of North Main Street is 950. So your house is 3 feet above North Main. So North Main would overtop before water got to your house. And that's probably what has happened historically. We've had tests over the years, and I don't think the water has gotten to your house. And I think the inundation map would show we're overtopping North Main Street.
I'm not aware of any water. And by the way, I'm very comfortable with what I'm saying. I was simply asking, it's gonna cost money to go. As long as we're gonna spend money going on the road, why not go straight across North Main? Where there's not even a question, it wouldn't hit anybody's house. That's all, that was my question.
Yeah, so, but to make any difference, it would have to be a bigger pipe than what's already there, a bigger culvert than the 4x4. So
So why? It wouldn't have to go through Christine's whole front yard?
Oh, yeah, but it's underneath the ground. Yeah, I mean, it's like a sewer underneath the ground. You wouldn't see it.
No, I know, I mean, you won't see it either, but I just am trying to picture what you're thinking, you're saying it should run parallel to Locust.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying,
You'd have to do 2 road tests. Yeah, 2 culverts.
Right.
And that's what makes it significantly more expensive.
Because we still, no matter what, have to replace the culvert that's under the road now because it's in.
Correct.
condition.
Yep.
So like
Correct.
that's happening.
That
The question
has
is,
to happen.
do we do that and North Main, as Mr. Supel suggested, or do we do the one cut,
Yeah,
the diagonal cut across Locust and tie it to the existing 4x4 culvert under North Main in good condition?
and I'm not trying to decide this. I understand. I told you, I think this 4x4 makes me feel a lot better. And I'm just asking you a question. As long as we're cutting under the road, why not go to where there will be absolutely no questions for Christine or me? That's all.
and your word before we're, don't just move a problem from one side of the road to the other. So understood, we're taking that into consideration.
When we put in a culvert, a 4x4 culvert, are these like pre-cast, so they're coming in on the crane?
yeah, there's sections.
I just have a question. I noticed that on these areas, you guys put like, the options of like what happens on a 25-year flood. And I know that on our original presentation back in November, you guys didn't have the data that I sent you about Willow Lane from like what actually happens there on a 1-year flood. Is there possible you guys can add in that data before you upload it tomorrow on like, we have issues on a 1-year flood, not a 25-year event. So I just was curious if you guys can add those numbers into that presentation before you upload it.
I can probably get that to you separately.
Okay. I think it can be public for everyone to see what's going on, but I mean, it's either way, it's fine.
Maybe they could add it as an addendum once they can get those put on us.
We can do that.
Can I go too far?
Um,
No, not far enough. There we go.
um,
So before we get into funding opportunities, if that's what our, we have one more.
Yeah, it
Because
was,
what I wanted to do is give Chris the opportunity to reach out to the people virtually and open the floor and let them know how they can ask a question, because we haven't heard anything from there yet, just to make sure they do how to connect.
this was just to show you that we would have to raise up the elevation, the ground elevation, kind of to where her basement is to protect it.
Yep.
That's just what that's trying to show. So it would have to make her ground a little bit higher and then kind of that 3-to-1 slope. That slope would have vegetation on it and the stream would be at that lower horizontal line.
So if you're attending virtually, and assuming they can hear me, you can use the raise your hand function in the chat and we will be able to bring you in to ask questions.
Go ahead.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Can you go to the next slide?
Oh. Sure.
And this is what I made. Where the stream comes to her house, it turns. So I'm thinking like physics, like why are we letting the water turn and back up? Why not just take it between her and her other neighbor underground and out? Why turn it at her house and affect these two? I know naturally the stream is turning, but.
Well, naturally, I think the stream was in the road, or, I didn't, historically, the whole area was a stream.
Right.
And then they buried the stream and built on top of it.
But I guess what I'm saying
So-
is why not then, instead of building the whole culvert and everything, going to overlook this, why not build something between her and her neighbor to take the water directly to North Main and out, wherever.
So you're saying,
Don't turn it.
bury the stream.
Yeah, don't turn it at her house and let it continue going straight and out.
Mhm.
Do you mean like piping it underground?
Yeah.
You go back a little more.
That's what I'm saying,
More?
don't
I
turn
would
it.
go the other way.
This one, right?
No, next one. I mean, keep going.
Yeah.
So you mean,
Like where the circle is.
yep. So where that second circle is. So you're saying, instead of having open channel, you're saying here?
Yeah, right there, just go, keep going straight to the north, right here, yeah, just go straight across, like taking underground and out.
I mean, that would be private property, easements and utilities and another crossing over the road. So it's just a lot more expensive.
When we get to the
Awesome.
proposed solutions, there is funding available for natural solutions. There's not funding available for what they call gray solutions.
And I don't know if in permitting, if you would be the Army Corps of Engineers or Ohio EPA would let you do that because it's an open stream. So it's property of the United States. So they're trying to daylight streams as opposed to buried streams.
But aren't we taking it underground and his yard?
We're just adjusting what's already there. So instead of having to do an L shape, just a direct line to where the model says that manhole that's in front of his yard, that manhole, there's a 4x4 culvert that's in excellent condition and there's no problem. So we're just trying to get the water to that point. So it was basically saying, if you did nothing else, If you did none of the other options, 1 through 4 that we said, you put in this 4x4, there wouldn't be any flooding down here. You still have flooding, that 4x4 stops. So regardless of all the additional improvements we're saying, to kind of all that wetland area and smart pond, if you didn't do any of that, that 4x4 would take all the stormwater flow and move it downstream. Not that that's the best holistic solution, but it would work. So the idea is that everything from that, so on the other side of North Main, it's open channel again. It's just the river is right there. So all that infrastructure is in place and in good condition.
If you were to just replace the culvert, that would also have the erosive impacts of all that flow coming through, if nothing was done.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. All the pollution or the sediments. Yes. If we didn't do all that, correct. But as far as mitigating flooding, the localized flooding would not happen. So yeah, if you could, yeah, right. So this was,
This is the
yeah,
downstream.
downstream.
Yeah, this is the downstream storage area. As we showed last time, in the red, it's just showing the percent peak flow reduction. So again, it's the most effective in the smaller storms and then kind of goes down.
And this was just comparing, since it's been a while since you saw the upstream wetland to the downstream, it's just trying to show you, if you look comparatively at the 1 and 2 year storm, it's actually pretty equal amounts. So it's that downstream is storing a lot. It is very effective. So there's of course a difference. It about doubles for the upstream capacity because it's like a football field, if not more. So in a larger storm, you're going to have larger capacity up there. So that's just trying to show you that. So these are a lot of numbers, but this is what this is saying now is what if you did both wetland storage areas together? So if you did that, I would have your eyes go down to the second table for the 10-year storm. If you look at the outgoing peak flow right there, so 50 CFS is kind of the capacity of that 30-inch pipe that goes underneath Locust Lane. So if you did those two, my point is if you did those two wetland storage areas, not even considering the smart pond, it would go through. You know, you basically would have enough flow for a 10-year event. So that's how much those wetland areas would potentially help. So at the end of the day, if you did those, potentially you could just do a smaller parallel pipe to what's there. And not even, I mean, that's a whole nother, whole nother angle to go. If you want to go a different angle, is that, if you want to start talking about potential reduction, you could do that. So up in those terms. So, and then looking at the cost comparison for all the alternatives, basically green costs about 2/3 as much as gray. Gray infrastructure is more expensive than green, and green, there's a lot more funding opportunity for green infrastructure. So, and then what's available? There are a lot. There are federal applications, grant applications that we can help the village apply for. It's not a small task. It takes about a year. For example, I just worked on one that I started in October that is just finishing up now. So it's not some of them are not, it's federal government, they're not small, but they're millions of dollars. They do give a lot of money. So it's possible for that. I would just note that these change all the time. So it's kind of every year you check in with all the agencies, and you start the application process. So for example, Ohio EPA, the Sugar River had, through the help of the partnership with the Sugar River Watershed Partners, was able to fund a project for the town. So annually, it'd be great to put another project in, so that next year you get more funding for the next project. So it just takes a little bit of work to get a project plan sheet on there, but you can take any of these from the stormwater study and get that into that process. And in addition to that, FEMA has a new building resilient infrastructure communities program, BRIC, that they have just put a lot of money into.
Is that the federal infrastructure fund?
That, as far as infrastructure bill, that is a little different than that. That's additional money. That's when you break it down to communities, depending on where they put it in, that could be in a whole different pot of money. So yes, that's more. So BRIC is an annual thing regardless of the bill.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then there is also private organizations that like to fund green infrastructure for urban and suburban developments. The National Education Fund has a program. There's urban federal wildlife association has another one. And there's also loans that you can take out as well as just the grants. But the point is there are multiple agencies that like to see and like to help communities with the program. So where we end things on are, having this meeting, sharing thoughts and sharing ideas for what you see your next steps being, figuring out what the priorities are so you can, we start the process of grant writing and help out the flooding.
You got preliminary cost estimates for various phases, like for example, what would it cost to put in the upstream wetland? What would it cost to put in the so it might be helpful if we could put some numbers, very preliminary numbers of those various phases, and understand what ought to occur. And then we need to talk with Tim and the hard engineers about what we're doing under the work. That's all been held in advance. So you completed this study to see what the sizing needed to be in the other things.
Right, actually, they're already done. They're already complete. So they were in that chart, but we've updated since the chart. So they're ballpark around the same thing, maybe around, I'm gonna say 200,000. Maybe they varied from 130,000 to 250. It was Willow the most expensive one,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. But I did have I had two questions. So, Mr. Mayor said that there's no money for gray solutions, only green solutions. So, would the green solution solve the problem on Willow Lane?
Completely.
Like, even your storm would it solve?
I don't think I think we are committing, we have to have a grant construction doing that undersized pipe. I mean, there's no way around that. We have to, fix the culvert down in Locust Lane. No alternative to that. What I meant was breaking these components down so that we understood what was going on. They could be in parallel, for example. We fix the gray infrastructure that we have to fix, and they applied for grants while that was going on for the other things. That kind of staging of the whole process is what I was getting at.
And some of these grants also require us to use matching funds, like often like what, 10, 15, 20%, depending. And so if we also pair them and the projects are one, we can also look at the gray infrastructure dollars as sort of being some of our contribution to help those dollars go farther. Am I making that up incorrectly?
No, we can, there's a lot of.
I think they're kind of got to stand on the loan. I think, like, for example, if you get a 319 put in the wetland, they would look for a contribution towards that wetland for the local, just for that wetland. I think the gray infrastructure has to be.
You don't think on Willow we can combine them?
Not in an application, no.
Yeah, no. There might be some monies for, there probably would be some green infrastructure money for doing North Street and North Cleveland Street, and possibly something on Willow, but that bigger pipe, the undersized pipe that we have to replace, that would be on our own. The wetland, there might be some money available for the culvert under Locust. That's standalone. It has to be, yeah. So that's what I was looking at how you would see it. I can't read those numbers. I just wait.
Yeah. I agree.
So will there be another meeting, like, about what funds are available to fix, or the priorities to fix gray areas?
Yeah, you're gonna have to be.
When can we expect that meeting back, like,
We have to plan it out there and see
Yeah,
how we're gonna proceed.
yeah, I think. Well, it's not gonna be, 6 months from now, but
Yeah, just-
yeah, like it has to be.
you know, we've been dealing with issues for 2 years, so, we greatly appreciate the study that's been taking a year. Obviously, the data, the raw data is very good, and this all leads to the, execution of the plan, but we need to know a timeline, and it's, like, from our last meeting in November to here, there was really no, we're gonna have a meeting soon, and it ended up being 5 months, so, we just need to
Bob,
make sure.
when do
that-
you think we could have a meeting?
We have to find out what that agenda will be, so I can't give you an estimate right now, obviously, within the next couple of months, we'd like to do something.
Yeah.
We have to take a look at that in the scheme of everything that we have going on right now. I don't want to commit to something and then be wrong. So, I mean, obviously, this doesn't end tonight. This is something we are just kicking off, and we need to have a lot more further discussion on the next step. So I think internally, we need to get that discussion going and plan that out. And keep it in line. Obviously, we have great interest and concern by the residents, so we have to play that into how we map this forward.
So we have a lot of projects in the sort of capital budget, like list, if you will. So I think what the administration needs to do is take a minute to take all these numbers back and look at where we can, because it becomes this big jigsaw puzzle, right? So like when we're doing a downtown bridge, like it lets us do things here, but not in these areas, because when the bridge is under construction, clearly we can't do construction on like a main arterial road. So like they need to put together some of the pieces both logistically and where and how we can have the money and the funds available, so we can bring that to council and talk about solutions. But I think, how do you guys feel about these? Like Christine?
Oh, I think that's great. And I'll tell you that in a minute, but I did have a question about, so I understood, and perhaps wrongly, that the money was already in the budget to do the locust lane.
So Locust Lane Culvert is in the budget this year.
Will it be done this year?
Well, we're looking at that now because the idea of relocating it came up as we did this analysis. So instead of just replacing that pipe with a larger pipe, the way it sits now, we're looking at that bigger picture solution of trying to connect it through. That might cause a little delay in getting that done. We're trying not to have that happen, but that's part of this discussion we need to have. The biggest thing is getting the initial reaction from the residents to these ideas and concepts. And then we're going to take a closer look at these 5 areas, these issues, kind of look at possible ease of funding with the funding applications that are out there, looking at the priorities of where we can make the greatest impact in the shortest amount of time. And those are the things that we need to help to try to figure out. Because we don't want to, we know all of this, every piece of this is important and it's all critical. So it's coming up with a plan, but we probably don't have the money to do all of it at once. So we need to work on that strategy.
So I guess I would say this sounds wonderful, and I do very much appreciate that you spent all this time on like all this. From my perspective, I'm sure other people have different perspectives, but from my perspective, this looks great. And all of these, if there would be a way to do them all, that would be fabulous. It sounds like you're definitely going to do the gray, and then you're going to look at your budget and figure out what you're going to do as it relates to these other items, and then you will be doing perhaps some grant writing for these other items. I know that the watershed has contacted certain homeowners, not only in Strand, but in other places who have issues like this, and I happen to be one of them. And they have proposed a plan where with the money, and probably speak more to that, Ken, but with the money that they're able to get grants, that I could spend, $10,000 of my own money, and I have absolutely no understanding of how that would work with this. And so it sounds to me like you're trying to get grant money to do 1, 2, 3, 4, not just 5, but 1, 2, 3, 4, and part of 5 on the one hand, but on the other hand, I've been said, it's been said to me that in order to get this accomplished, you're going to need to put in $10,000 for this completely different, maybe not different, I don't know, solution. And I had when I got that first note from Chagrin Watershed, I had sent an email to you guys and said, hey, is this gonna work in any way with what the village is doing? And no one responded at all. So I'm still in the dark about how is that supposed to work together? That's my first question. And my second question is, I understand, and I've not ever worked in village government, but I understand you have a budget, you have to try and do everything for everybody and do what's most important for the village and will affect the most people and solve problems for everyone. And so here's Rick and I and a few people with problems, but these are big problems, serious problems. And I wonder, should we have built a trail down by the river and spent $175,000 of money that could have been going to?
That was specific state money that didn't come out of the local taxes. It was,
What about the new playground the village is gonna put $200,000 for? I think it's a great idea, but if it means my house is gonna flood, then I don't think it's such a good idea.
that isn't committed to yet, but
But that's what I worry about, that I mean, understandably, you have to prioritize and determine where the money's gonna go. And I think if you have residents who are experiencing flooding, that is a more serious issue. That is.
we were aware of the flooding were well of the priority, and we've got, money in the budget for it solves your problem. But, we're looking at the other, and, we're gonna apply for grants for various pieces, and, move forward with that, on the money, but the bigger culvert going under the road is gonna be done.
And again, I appreciate it. It seems like that little trail, someone was able to get the grant money and put that trail in, which is lovely, but really, did it need to be done? No. And here I am.
Those are coming out of different pots. That came out of an Ohio Nature Works plan program that just is specifically for trails, and that you couldn't use that money for these types of things. You got specific programs that cover specific things.
Now we're identifying that, now we're applying for.
Yeah, I think she's talking about the effort.
The
The
time.
effort it is how quickly that was done. To the effort that's like.
Well, that actually started about 4 or 5 years ago. That just didn't start this year. And that grant has been applied for, I think, 2 or 3 times before we got it. But
I was not on council when they actually applied for and got that grant. I mean, that's how many years.
And maybe this is interesting, I mean, like Willow's had problems since 2007, like 2 owners prior to me. So over 15 years. So it's not like these are just 2 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
it's more like it's been there as long as your house has been there. I know somebody that lived there and the Binos that lived there in the 1990s, and they had some problems. I've seen the garage filled with water, so I
Well, if they would have been the honest people and disclosed that on whoever disclosed that on buying a house, we never bought a house. So I don't get into that issue, but what I'm saying is that we've known about issues for 15+ years. So I guess what we're trying to do as citizens is make sure that adequate time is not being spent on doing, beautification to Chagrin. I mean, obviously we want people to come here and enjoy our city, but you can't have a city unless you have citizens that are.
No,
here.
we understand that, and we're gonna, move this forward, everything was sort of held up while we studied the whole watershed, because we didn't know the volumes, we didn't know what could be, done upstream, downstream, etc. And this is an integrated problem, and it has to be attacked as an integrated problem. Now, the gray, like I said, has to be paid for, and will be done on the village's ticket. Part of it done this year. I don't know where we are on a pipe between Willow and Down, if that's this year, but okay. So, we're gonna, move parts of this forward right away. Parts of this will be, applying for grant funding and try to leverage the tax dollars, and the whole thing will be moved forward. But what we need to have an internal meeting with the engineering staff and look at when we can do that. We planned actually to do the culvert down by Susan's house last year, and that was put on hold while we did this whole study of the watershed to see, what size that pipe ought to be, because we didn't know. We knew 30 inches wasn't big enough. But we didn't have the data to answer, Mr. Subel, was 42 big enough, or did it have to be something else? So we gathered the data as opposed to, running off and doing a solution and finding out later that we should have done something else. So, we're moving forward in a logical, methodical way, but, and you'll see some action this year, and you'll see the rest of the action over the time. Is that probably, Tim, is best as we can do right tonight?
Right, we have more homework to do.
And so,
Yeah, you're asking opinions, I just want to be clear. As I said earlier, I think this solution will work. I think it's great work, it makes sense. I think the idea of the retention basins will help a lot. The fact that you're connecting that to a 4x4 culvert is huge. It's probably it'll carry twice the volume that comes out of your yard now, which I just visually, you gotta say it's gotta work. And so my question before was, as I said, I think this is a good plan.
Yeah, just to follow up, the pipe that would have gone in had the drainage shift happen, I believe it was an elliptical pipe that was only 22 by 36. So I think you would have spent the money and still had problems.
I absolutely appreciate that you all had the foresight to take the time to do the study. I do really, really appreciate that. My only question was about, the use of funds and will there be enough funds and the priorities. I greatly appreciate that you taking the time to do the study, and your solutions seem wonderful to me.
Just to kind of build on Kristen's question, so CWP does have a grant right now that funds stream stabilization and could incorporate some floodplain reconnection along the stream on Kristen's property. And so just to kind of build on what she was asking, for this particular opportunity, the grant is paying for half, and the landowner cost shares the other half. And so I wondered, we are seeking grant funding for some of this work, and we have this funding now up with the grant. Is it a good time to think of that site with the opportunity we have? Or do you think further discussion and study is needed to determine when and how that happens on her property later down the road? Or is that more of like an internal?
So I think that it's an internal, so one of the issues we have right now, you have that program right now, you have no numbers right now to do that one little piece. Obviously, residents want to get something done right away, but there's a price tag attached to that. The problem, and this is the difficulty of where at now, I don't have a good answer for her, because if there's a grant program that can say it is part of a bigger picture application that could pay for 80 or 90% of that, so she doesn't have to spend $8,000 to $10,000 of her own money for that. That is a possibility here too. So I don't want to say, yes, do this, and a year later I get a 90% funded project upstream, then she's going to be pretty upset that I said, or I recommended, or the village recommended, yes, do this project through the watershed partners and spend your $10,000 to meet that cost share. That's why the timing of this, and I mean, the elements of this is we're in a very difficult spot. She wants this problem fixed right away, but this is the reality of where we're at. We're going to pursue funding opportunities for this that have, we have possibilities. We don't have like this project in 2 months we're going to be applying for that's going to be directly applied to her project. We don't know that yet. So we're in a very difficult spot to give her good advice right now on what's right, what's the right way to go. If money was no object and she's like, I need a result right now, I'm going to spend the 10 grand, I'm fine with it. Well, that project will be an accepted, acceptable solution and part of this overall plan. It will achieve results in a quicker amount of time. However, the risk is that there isn't one that you can apply for after the fact saying, oh, by the way, I'd like to get $10,000 back for this resident from 2 years ago. There's no program that does that. So that's where our difficulty lies right now, is trying to be fair and do what we can on behalf of the residents. So our next step is to talk about these. When did these grant applications come out? What is the match amounts? There's a lot of detail that has to go into that, and figuring out what we can apply for, what we have a very good shot in getting. I can say that CT staff has been exceptional in researching these grants and crafting their grant applications for success. We've had a very high success rate. Some of them we haven't got the first round, but we've got the feedback on what's worked in our application, what hasn't, what we need to change in order to reapply. And a lot of times on the second application, we've been successful. We have a project right now that we're waiting to hear back on that look pretty good. So we're trying very hard to leverage that and make the right decision for our residents, and also that fits our budget, given the overall scope of things in the coming years.
It's hard because the momentum is behind the scenes at this point, and it's not expressly seen by those in attendance. But the momentum with the administration and with CT is constantly moving. It's just not felt and seen yet.
I appreciate everything you guys do, honestly. Like what you guys are showing tonight, I've had many meetings with, you at my property, and I appreciate that. All I'm asking for is just a timeline to, for that to be. If it's end of July, okay, great. Now I know when to follow with you guys and say, we've had 2 months and you guys have been working hard behind the scenes, and now I know when to check in.
So let's, we need a little bit of time here to come up with a game plan where I can give you an adequate prediction of the timeline. Because I would be guessing tonight, and that's not fair to you or us, and if we're wrong, then we failed you in your eyes, and we want to make sure that we're giving adequate information. So we will be having a follow-up meeting internally to talk about this and plan, of course, moving forward. The main thing what we want to do and the objective of tonight is to present the results of CT study, to get the ideas out there in the public, to get this presentation distributed to the public, and get your feedback and find out, because there could have been people here saying, absolutely not, I don't want that at all. That's not acceptable. And then we have to look at, okay, maybe that's going to be a harder sell or something we have to cross off our list. But once we get the feedback that there's interest and support for what we're doing, now we can say, okay, how can we turn this into an action plan? Or what does that look like given these outside funding opportunities? So that's where we're going to be looking at next. I mean, we're going to move as quick as we can on that. It's a process. Some of these grant application timing, is when they offer the grants, as I was talking with Mary Ann earlier, some of the parameters of the grants change year to year as well. How much money is available, the percentage of match, sometimes it's been reduced. Sometimes it actually is a better advantage to the village when they come up with a revision. So we're going to be looking at all those items, but at least we have a lot of options here for funding. So we didn't have that grant opportunity, we would be in a rough spot right now in trying to fit some of these high dollar projects into our capital plan scheme.
Can I take a final opportunity to ask the people in attendance online if there are questions? Raise your hand via Zoom. We'd be happy to allow you to speak or ask a question.
So it is helpful for your neighbors who were not able to attend tonight or who weren't able to log in on Zoom. If you want to share with them, we'll have a meeting
Immediately.
right now on YouTube, right?
It is, and I'll launch the page first thing in the morning. I have it pre-built, so it'll be up first thing in the morning.
Everyone will be able to download the presentations from the village website, and then you will watch it again tonight on YouTube if you'd like to see it again. But it'd be helpful if people gave us their feedback. My email's on there. I'm happy to also Rob Jameson, the mayor. If you want to email us, let us know what your thoughts and concerns are. It does affect private property, and so we're trying to balance, all of these pieces. And I mean, I'll say I'm really optimistic that people aren't upset with the idea of the wetlands and the storage opportunities we have for water. I think we're in a good spot. I was expecting some of these to be thrown off the table. I didn't know what they were on that. So it's something. Usually something gets thrown off the table. So let us know your thoughts so that we can continue to do that and make sure that anything we send to council will get to the administration as well, so they can see that as they go through their pieces. But we'll be looking for that priorities probably late summer is my guess, although Rob's going to give any sort of timeline.
These are all things we have to look at with priorities.
So thank you guys for coming out tonight. Any other questions? Okay, then we will adjourn tonight at 8:46.